What if I told you there's a goddess who could make warriors fall in love as easily as she could lead them into battle? A figure so powerful, she commanded both the fierceness of war and the tenderness of love, weaving magic into every corner of Norse mythology. This is Freya, or Freyja, as some whisper her name, a force of nature wrapped in elegance, a deity whose stories are as enchanting as they are formidable. She isn't just another character in the sagas, she's the heart of them, a goddess who defies simple labels and demands to be remembered. Picture this: a woman who rides a chariot pulled by two majestic cats, wears a cloak of falcon feathers that lets her soar between worlds, and owns a necklace so dazzling it ignites greed in the hearts of gods and giants alike. This isn't just fantasy, this is Freya's reality, a glimpse into the life of a goddess who shaped destiny itself. But her tale goes far deeper than her legendary beauty or her prowess in battle. Behind the shimmering surface lies a story of resilience, cunning, and raw power, one that reveals how she became one of the most revered and feared figures in all of Norse lore. So why does Freya's name still echo through the centuries? Because she wasn't just a goddess, she was a symbol of the unbreakable spirit, a reminder that strength and softness can coexist in ways that shake the very foundations of myth. From her role in the fate of fallen warriors to her unshakable will in the face of betrayal, Freya's legacy is a tapestry of passion, magic, and unyielding might. And today, we're unraveling that tapestry thread by thread, diving into the full story of the goddess who ruled both battlefields and hearts. Prepare to be enchanted, because this isn't just a myth. This is Freya. Freya's story begins not among the Aesir, the gods we often associate with Norse mythology, but with the Vanir, an older, enigmatic race of deities tied to the earth, fertility, and magic. Born to Njord, the god of the sea and winds, and likely a mother whose name has been lost to time, Freya grew up alongside her twin brother Freyr, a god of peace, prosperity, and sunlight. Together, they embodied the essence of the Vanir, life, abundance, and the untamed forces of nature. But the peace of their world wouldn't last. A great conflict, known as the Aesir-Vanir War, erupted between the two divine clans, a brutal clash that shook the foundations of the cosmos. No one truly remembers who struck first or why, but the battles raged until both sides, exhausted and bloodied, agreed to a truce. And so, as part of the peace, the Vanir sent their brightest treasures, Freya, Freyr, and their father Njord, to live among the Aesir as hostages. Yet Freya was never one to be contained. What started as a forced alliance soon became something far more profound. The Aesir, who once saw her as an outsider, came to revere her. She wasn't just a Vanir goddess living among them, she became indispensable. Why? Because she brought something they lacked, an understanding of seiðr, the ancient magic of fate and foresight, a power so potent even Odin in himself sought her guidance. But Freya was more than a sorceress. She was a paradox, a goddess who could stand shoulder to shoulder with warriors on the battlefield, choosing half the slain for her hall in Fólkvangr, while also presiding over love, beauty, and the harvest. Where other gods had defined roles, Freya refused to be boxed in. Her duality is what makes her so fascinating. One moment, she's the radiant deity who teaches mortals the art of love, her very presence making flowers bloom and hearts quicken. The next, she's the fearless leader, clad in armor, her legendary necklace Brísingamen gleaming like a beacon as she rides into battle. Even among the gods, she stood apart, neither fully Vanir nor Aesir, yet embraced by both. And that's the heart of Freya's power. She transcends boundaries, weaving together war and fertility, magic and might, in a way no other god could. Freya's presence was as striking as the legends that surrounded her, a vision of power and grace that left no doubt she was divine. At the center of her mystique was Brísingamen, her golden necklace, a masterpiece forged by dwarves and coveted by gods and giants alike. More than mere jewelry, it shimmered with an otherworldly light, a symbol of desire and unattainable perfection. Myths whisper that Freya went to great lengths to obtain it, trading not gold or favors, but something far more personal, a night with each of the 4 dwarf craftsmen who created it. This wasn't just a transaction, it was a statement. Freya refused to be bound by others' expectations, even if it meant defying the judgment of the gods. Then there was her cloak of falcon feathers, a garment that allowed her to shift shape and soar across the 9 realms. Imagine the sight, a woman transformed into a bird of prey, cutting through the sky with the same fierce elegance she carried on Earth. This wasn't just a tool for travel, it was a symbol of her fluidity, her ability to move between worlds, both physically and metaphorically. With it, she could slip into the shadows of the underworld or rise to the glittering halls of Asgard, unshackled by the limits that confined others. But perhaps nothing captured Freya's essence quite like her chariot, pulled not by horses or dragons, but by 2 massive cats. Some say they were lynxes, their eyes gleaming with untamed magic. These creatures, loyal only to her, mirrored her own spirit, independent, fierce, and impossible to control. Where other gods rode steeds of thunder or fire, Freya's choice was a deliberate rebellion, a reminder that her power came from a different kind of wildness. And then there was her beauty, a radiance so potent it could disarm kings and ignite wars. Men and gods alike fell under its spell, but Freya was no passive ornament. Her allure was a weapon, a shield, and occasionally, a burden. When the giant Thrym stole Thor's hammer and demanded her hand in marriage as ransom, the gods panicked not because they feared for her, but because they knew she'd never consent to being bartered. Even in myths where others tried to reduce her to a prize, Freya outmaneuvered them, turning their greed into her advantage. That's the paradox of Freya. Her beauty wasn't just admired, it was feared. It drew desire, yes, but also envy, manipulation, and challenges from those who thought they could claim her. Yet time and again, she proved that her true power lay not in how she looked, but in how she refused to be owned. Every symbol she carried, the necklace, the cloak, the chariot, was a testament to that defiance. They weren't just pretty trinkets or accessories, they were declarations. And in a world where gods often played by rigid rules, Freya rewrote them with every step she took. While Odin's Valhalla often steals the spotlight in tales of the Norse afterlife, Freya's realm, Fólkvangr, holds its own haunting beauty, a place where the fallen are welcomed not with the clashing of swords, but with a quieter, more profound honor. Imagine a field so vast it seems to stretch beyond the horizon, its golden grasses swaying under an eternal twilight. Here, Freya claims half of all warriors who die in battle, choosing her share with a discerning eye. Unlike Valhalla, where the slain train for Ragnarok in endless combat, Fólkvangr offers something different, a sanctuary where the weary find rest, where the air hums with the warmth of feasts and the murmur of stories exchanged under starlight. At the heart of this realm stands Sessrúmnir, Freya's hall, a place as enigmatic as the goddess herself. Described in some texts as a ship turned upside down, its curved walls cradle a space that defies expectation. This isn't a hall of roaring mead-drunk warriors. It's a haven of quiet strength where the dead are honored not just for their prowess in battle, but for the lives they lived. Some say Sessrúmnir's ship-like shape ties Freya to the Vanir's ancient connection to the sea, a nod to her father Njord. Others whisper it's a symbol of journeys, both to the afterlife and within oneself. What makes Fólkvangr truly remarkable isn't just its contrast to Valhalla, but what it reveals about Freya's nature. Odin gathers warriors for a final, apocalyptic war. Freya welcomes them for who they are. In her halls, there's no pressure to prove oneself anew, no relentless march toward destiny. Instead, there's acceptance, a gentle acknowledgement that even the fiercest fighters deserve peace. And yet, don't mistake this for weakness. Fólkvangr is still a warrior's realm, just one that understands battle isn't the only measure of worth. This duality is classic Freya, a place of softness and strength, where the echoes of clashing steel fade into the rustle of leaves and the laughter of those who have earned their rest. It's a reminder that she, too, walks the line between war and serenity, a goddess who knows the cost of conflict but refuses to let it define those who fall. So while Valhalla prepares for an ending, Fólkvangr offers something rarer, a beginning beyond the battlefield, where the slain find not just glory, but grace. Freya's relationship with the Valkyries is one of Norse mythology's best-kept secrets, a thread often buried beneath Odin's more famous ties to these warrior maidens. But peel back the layers, and you'll find Freya's influence woven into their very essence. While Odin's Valkyries are depicted as stern choosers of the slain, riding forth to harvest souls for Valhalla, Freya's connection to them carries a different weight. She doesn't just share the battlefield with them, she embodies their duality, their ability to straddle the line between life and death, love and war. Consider this: Freya herself is called a Valkyrie in some texts, not merely a goddess who oversees them. In the poem Grimnismal, she's named among the divine figures who chooses the slain, a role directly mirroring the Valkyrie's duty. But where Odin's emissaries collect warriors for an apocalyptic battle, Freya's selections feel more personal, more nuanced. She doesn't just take the strongest or the bravest. She claims those whose stories resonate with her own, fighters who have loved deeply, lost fiercely, or defied fate itself. Then there's the lesser-known tale of the battle at Hjörungavík, where Freya doesn't just inspire the Valkyries, she orchestrates the conflict itself. When her beloved mortal king, Hedin, is slain, she refuses to let his death be meaningless. She ensures the battle reignites every day, an unending cycle of vengeance and resurrection, with Valkyries whispering in the ears of warriors, stoking the flames of war. Here, Freya isn't a passive observer, she's the force behind the curtain, bending the Valkyries' purpose to her will. It's a stark reminder that while Odin may command them, Freya understands them on a level he never could, because she, too, knows what it means to grieve, to rage, to love beyond death. And let's not forget the love magic that threads through their bond. Valkyries aren't just death-bringers, they're often depicted as radiant figures who stir desire in mortal hearts, much like Freya herself. In the Volsunga saga, the Valkyrie Brynhildr doesn't just choose warriors, she falls in love with one, defying Odin's orders. Sound familiar? It echoes Freya's own rebellions, her refusal to be confined by the expectations of gods or men. The Valkyries, in this light, become extensions of Freya's spirit, fierce yet tender, bound to war yet inseparable from love. So why does Odin overshadow Freya in Valkyrie lore? Perhaps because the myths were written by poets eager to please warrior kings, men who prioritized Odin's stoic mastery over Freya's messy, vibrant power. But dig deeper, and the truth emerges. Freya didn't just walk beside the Valkyries, she shaped them. In her, they found a patron who didn't just command their loyalty, but shared their hearts. And that's a legacy no amount of Odin-centric storytelling can erase. Freya's pursuit of Brísingamen wasn't just a quest for a dazzling trinket. It was a high-stakes game of wit, desire, and defiance. The story begins with four dwarven brothers, masters of their craft, who forged a necklace unlike any other. Its gold shimmered with an almost sentient light, each link humming with enchantments so potent they rivaled the gods' own treasures. When Freya caught wind of its existence, she knew she had to possess it. But dwarves don't deal in coins or favors lightly. They demanded a price only she could pay, a night with each of them in turn. Now, this wasn't merely a transaction. To some, it's a myth about the sun Brísingamen's radiant gleam symbolizing dawn, with Freya as the sky who must consort with the darkness, the dwarves to reclaim the light each morning. Others see it as a raw negotiation of power. Freya, a goddess unbound by shame, didn't hesitate. She walked into their forge, not as a victim bartering her body, but as an equal who understood the weight of her choices. When Loki later taunted her for the deal, her fury wasn't born of regret. It was the rage of a woman whose agency was being mocked. The necklace's legacy spirals further when Odin, upon learning how she obtained it, ordered Loki to steal it not out of morality, but control. Freya's independence threatened the Aesir's rigid order, yet even then, she outmaneuvered them, recovering Brísingamen through sheer force of will. This isn't just a tale of a pretty bauble, it's a manifesto. Every time Freya wore that necklace, it was a rebellion, a glittering reminder that her worth wasn't dictated by their judgment. Modern readings dissect the myth's layers. Feminist scholars highlight Freya's unapologetic ownership of desire, while historians trace parallels to ancient fertility rites where priestesses wielded intimacy as sacred power. Even the necklace's name, Brísingamen, sometimes translated as fire gleaming, hints at its role as a talisman of transformation. Freya didn't just accept the dwarves' terms, she turned them into legend, proving that true power isn't given. It's taken, polished, and worn without apology. Freya's arrival among the Aesir wasn't just a political maneuver, it was a seismic shift in the balance of power. The Aesir-Vanir war had left both sides scarred, their truce fragile, and the exchange of hostages was meant to be a symbol of trust, but Freya refused to be a mere token. Instead, she became a bridge between worlds, her very presence forcing the Aesir to confront the depth of what the Vanir had to offer. Where other hostages might have remained outsiders, Freya wove herself into the fabric of Asgard, not through submission, but by revealing the irresistible power of her seiðr. This magic wasn't the blunt force of Thor's hammer or the cunning of Odin's runes. Seiðr was subtle, a tapestry of fate and foresight spun from whispers and willpower. It allowed Freya to see the threads of destiny, to nudge them gently, or yank them hard when needed. The Aesir, for all their might, had no equivalent. Odin, ever hungry for knowledge, coveted it enough to learn from her, despite the stigma. In a society where seiðr was often dismissed as unmanly or chaotic, Freya's mastery forced a reckoning. She didn't just practice magic, she redefined its place in the divine order, proving it could be as lethal as any sword, yet her influence went deeper than spells. Freya became a peace weaver in the truest sense, using her dual allegiances to soften old grudges. Where treaties were signed, she fostered genuine connection through shared rituals, through the healing arts tied to her Vanir roots, even through the sheer magnetism of her presence. It's no accident that after the war, the Aesir began adopting Vanir customs, blending their pantheons until the lines blurred. Freya didn't just live among them, she transformed them. But respect always walks hand in hand with fear. Some Aesir whispered that her magic was too volatile, that a goddess who could bend destiny might one day twist it against them. Loki, ever the provocateur, sneered that her power came from dark places, a jab at the prejudice against Seidr's origins. Even Odin's admiration was laced with tension. He relied on her gifts, but never fully trusted them. Freya, ever unshaken, met their suspicions with quiet defiance. She didn't justify herself. She simply proved, time and again, that her magic wasn't a threat, unless you gave her reason to make it one. And that's the brilliance of her legacy in the war's aftermath. Freya didn't conquer Asgard. She seduced it, disarmed it, and reshaped it from within. By the time the Aesir realized how thoroughly she'd changed their world, it was too late to resist. They needed her, not just for her power, but for the balance she brought. In a realm where strength was measured in blows, Freya taught them there's another kind of might, the kind that threads itself into the very air you breathe, until no one remembers how they ever lived without it. Freya's magic wasn't just a skill, it was a revolution. At the heart of her power lay seiðr, an ancient form of Norse sorcery so potent it could unravel fate itself. Unlike the brute force of Thor's lightning or the strategic whispers of Odin's runes, seiðr was a delicate, dangerous art. It required spinning threads of destiny like a weaver at her loom, chanting incantations that could bend time, reveal hidden truths, or even twist the wills of gods and mortals alike. Freya didn't just practice this magic, she perfected it, becoming its most revered master in all the 9 realms. But here's the twist: seiðr wasn't just respected, it was feared. In Norse society, magic had a gendered divide. For women, it was an accepted, even expected, part of life. But for men, practicing seiðr carried a stigma, a whisper of shame. It was considered unmanly, chaotic, a defiance of the natural order. And yet, Odin, the Allfather himself, hungered for its secrets so deeply that he swallowed his pride to learn from Freya, despite the mockery it invited. Picture the scene: the god of war and wisdom, humbling himself before the Vanir goddess, not as a ruler, but as a student. Odin's pursuit of seiðr reveals just how formidable Freya's knowledge was. He traded an eye for wisdom at Mimir's well, but when it came to seiðr, there was no shortcut, only Freya's guidance. This tension between them crackles through the myths. Odin relied on her gifts, yet never fully trusted them. Freya, ever the enigma, shared just enough to keep him indebted, never revealing the full depth of her craft. It's a dance of power, one where she holds the lead. Nowhere is Freya's mastery clearer than in the myth of Baldur's death. When the sun god's ominous dreams foretold his demise, it was Freya who first recognized the threads of fate tightening around him. She could have intervened, perhaps, but prophecy isn't a tool for easy fixes. Seiðr reveals, it doesn't rewrite. And so, with a heavy heart, she watched as Baldur's mother, Frigg, futilely sought oaths from every creature to spare him, missing the one loophole Freya's magic had already foreseen: mistletoe. This wasn't indifference. It was the cruel clarity of a seer who understands some destinies are woven too tightly to undo. But Freya's prophecies weren't just passive warnings. In one lesser-known tale, she uses seiðr to manipulate a king's dreams, steering him toward a battle that would unite fractured lands. Here, magic isn't just observation, it's intervention. She doesn't merely predict the future, she nudges it, like a finger tipping a scale. That's the true power of seiðr. It's not about brute control, but the art of influence, of knowing which thread to pull and when. And then there's the taboo, the unspoken tension that lingers around her magic. Loki, ever the provocateur, sneers that seiðr is woman's work, a cheap trick beneath the dignity of gods. but his taunts ring hollow when Freya's visions prove sharper than Odin's ravens, her spells more unshakable than Thor's strength. The truth, Seidr unsettled the Aesir because it defied their hierarchies. Freya's magic couldn't be wielded like a hammer or a spear. It required intuition, patience, a willingness to surrender to the unknown. In a world obsessed with glory and conquest, her power was a quiet rebellion, one that proved sometimes the mightiest force isn't the one that shouts, but the one that whispers. That's the legacy of Freya's Seidr. It wasn't just spells and prophecies, it was a challenge to the very foundations of divine power. Every incantation, every vision, was a reminder that knowledge doesn't belong to any one gender, any one realm. And in a pantheon where gods so often clung to their roles, Freya's magic was a testament to the beauty of bending not just fate, but expectation itself. Freya and Odin's relationship was less a simple alliance or rivalry, and more like a dance, one where the partners alternated between stepping on each other's toes and moving in perfect sync. On the surface, they shared domains that should have made them natural allies. Both wielded magic, both commanded warriors, and both held sway over life and death. But dig deeper, and you'll find tension simmering beneath the mutual respect. Take the battlefield, for example. Odin's Valhalla and Freya's Fólkvangr split the slain warriors between them, a division that feels almost too neat. Why share at all unless there was an unspoken struggle for influence? Some scholars argue this wasn't just practicality, it was a power play, a way for Odin to contain Freya's growing reverence among mortal fighters without outright confrontation. Then there's the matter of magic. Odin, the so-called All-Father, was notorious for his relentless pursuit of knowledge, yet when it came to Seidr, he was the student and Freya the master. Their dynamic here is fascinating. Odin, who sacrificed an eye for wisdom, had to humble himself before her to learn the art of shaping fate. But don't mistake this for submission. Odin's pursuit of Seidr was strategic. By absorbing her craft, he diluted her exclusivity, turning what was once a Vanir secret into a tool the Aesir could wield. Freya, ever perceptive, likely saw this coming. She shared just enough to maintain her indispensability, while keeping the deepest layers of her power veiled a silent game of give and take, where neither side fully trusted the other. Yet for all their friction, there were moments of genuine collaboration. In the myth of Heimdall's birth, Freya and Odin work in tandem, their magic intertwining to create the watchful guardian of the gods. Here, their abilities complement rather than compete, suggesting that when the stakes were high enough, even gods with clashing agendas could set aside their pride. But these alliances were fleeting. More often, their relationship tilted toward rivalry, especially when Loki, ever the instigator, pit them against each other. In one tale, he taunts Odin for relying on a woman's magic, a barb designed to provoke. Odin's reaction: he doesn't defend Freya. Instead, he turns the insult back on Loki, revealing his discomfort with the very dependence he'd cultivated. So were they allies or adversaries? The answer lies in the gray between. Freya and Odin needed each other too much to be true enemies, but their ambitions kept them from ever being true partners. Odin coveted her magic, Freya leveraged his authority. They traded knowledge, shared spoils, and occasionally clashed over the souls of the dead, all while maintaining a careful, calculating distance. In the end, their relationship mirrors the duality of the Norse pantheon itself, a tapestry woven from cooperation and conflict, where even the mightiest gods knew that some lines were better crossed together, even if they'd never admit it aloud. Freya wasn't just a goddess, she was a prism. her many names refracting her identity into dazzling, distinct hues. Take Vanadis, Lady of the Vanir, a title that anchored her to the earth-old magic of her origins. It wasn't merely a nod to her ancestry, it was a reminder that even among the Aesir, she carried the untamed essence of the Vanir, fertility, seiðr, and a connection to the land that the storm-wielding gods could never replicate. Then there's Gefn, the Giver, a name that paints her as the lifeblood of harvests and hearths. Imagine a goddess who doesn't just bestow blessings but embodies them, her hands never empty, her presence synonymous with abundance. But Freya's names could shift like the northern lights. Call her Hern, the flaxen one, and suddenly you're speaking to the golden-haired weaver of fate, her hair itself a metaphor for the threads she spun with her magic. Yet whisper Mardurl, sea brightener, and her connection to her father Njord's realm emerges a goddess who could calm storms or summon them, her power as fluid as the waves. Even her most famous name, Freyja, simply means lady, but in her case, it was less a title and more a challenge. She wasn't just any lady, but the lady, the one against whom all others were measured. And then there are the names that reveal her fierceness. Valfreyja, Lady of the Slain, echoes through battlefields, a counterpart to Odin's grim role. Where he was the All-Father, she was the All-Mother, choosing her warriors with a discerning eye. Her hall in Fólkvangr, a sanctuary as revered as Valhalla. Sir, the sow might seem puzzling at first, until you remember the sow's sacred role in Norse fertility rites, a symbol of nourishment and raw, unstoppable life force. Freya wasn't just a warrior or a lover, she was the earth itself, capable of both nurturing and devouring. Perhaps most telling is Gullveig, a name shrouded in controversy. In some myths, she's the witch who sparked the Aesir-Vanir war. Her body burned 3 times by the gods only for her to rise again, reforged in flame. Here, Freya isn't just a goddess, she's a force of disruption, a being so potent she could survive annihilation and return stronger, whether as Skajolf, the Shaker, invoking earthquakes, or Thrung, the thronging one, embodying the press of battle. Each name peels back another layer of her mythos. These weren't just labels, they were keys to understanding her. To the farmers, she was Gefn, filling their barns. To the warriors, Valfreyja, guiding their swords. To the lovelorn, Hern, weaving desire into destiny. And to the gods, she was all of them, and none of them, a goddess who refused to be pinned down, her many names proof that even the Norse couldn't capture her in just one word. Freya's love stories read like a tapestry woven with threads of devotion, longing, and defiance, none more poignant than her marriage to Aesir, the god whose very name means ecstasy or frenzy. Their union was the stuff of legends, a pairing so electric it set the realms ablaze with envy. Together, they were fire and wind, passion and motion, their love igniting the skies. But Aesir was as elusive as he was enchanting. Some say he was a wanderer, drawn to the edges of the world by an insatiable restlessness. Others whisper he was an aspect of Odin himself, a shadowy double whose presence blurred the lines between the gods. Whatever the truth, his disappearance left Freya shattered. She didn't mourn quietly. Her grief was as fierce as her love, her tears falling as gold precious, gleaming, and utterly unstoppable. Where they touched the earth, they hardened into amber, tiny suns frozen in time. Sailors would find these golden droplets washed ashore, calling them Freya's tears, tokens of a love so vast it could transmute sorrow into something tangible, even beautiful. But don't mistake her weeping for weakness. Freya's tears weren't passive, they were alchemy, proof that even in her deepest despair, she transformed pain into power. And she never stopped searching for Other, traversing the 9 realms in her falcon cloak, turning over every stone and whispering his name into the wind. Some myths say she found him, if only for fleeting moments before he vanished again, a cycle as relentless as the tides. Now, contrast this with her dealings with the giants, beings who saw her not as a goddess to revere, but as a prize to claim. When the giant Thrym stole Thor's hammer and demanded Freya as his bride in exchange, the gods panicked, but Freya's response was immediate: fury. "You think I'd let myself be bartered like a sack of grain?" She roared, her eyes flashing with a light that made even Odin step back. The gods, desperate, devised a plan. Thor would disguise himself as Freya, wearing her bridal veil and Brísingamen, to infiltrate Thrym's hall. The absurdity of it, the thunder god playing bride, underscored Freya's unshakable principle. She would not be traded, no matter the cost. Then there was the giant Hrungnir, who boasted he'd haul Freya away along with the sun and moon. She didn't wait for the gods to defend her. Armed with her wits and a well-timed prophecy, she turned his arrogance against him, luring him into a duel with Thor that ended in the giant's demise. Even in the myth of the builder who promised to fortify Asgard's walls in exchange for Freya's hand, she wasn't a passive stake, she was the loophole. When the gods realized the builder was a giant in disguise, they sent Loki to sabotage the deal, ensuring Freya's freedom. These stories aren't just about love and resistance, they're about agency. With Other, Freya loved fiercely, grieved openly, and never surrendered hope. With the giants, she refused to be reduced to a conquest, out-maneuvering them at every turn. Whether through golden tears or cunning stratagems, she defied the expectation that a goddess of love must be soft, that a woman's worth is measured by her compliance. Freya's heart was her own, to give, to mourn, or to wield as a weapon, and that, perhaps, is her most enduring magic. Freya's chariot wasn't pulled by horses or dragons, but by 2 massive cats, creatures as enigmatic as the goddess herself. Their presence in her myths isn't just a whimsical detail, it's a window into Norse beliefs about feline power. These weren't ordinary house cats. Some sagas describe them as lynxes, their tufted ears and piercing eyes radiating an untamed magic. Others suggest they were giant, mythic beasts, their fur glistening like frost under moonlight. But why cats? Because no creature better embodied Freya's essence, grace and ferocity intertwined, domesticity and wildness in perfect balance. In Norse culture, cats were liminal beings, straddling the line between the familiar and the uncanny. Farmers welcomed them into barns to ward off vermin, yet whispered stories of cats slipping into the spirit world after dark. They were both protectors and predators, their soft paws hiding claws sharp enough to tear through illusions. Freya's choice to harness them as her chariot team was a declaration. She, too, moved effortlessly between worlds, unbound by rigid categories. Just as cats could lounge by the hearth one moment and vanish into the forest the next, Freya embodied duality, nurturer and warrior, lover and seer. There's also a deeper layer of symbolism here. Cats were sacred to the Vanir, Freya's original pantheon, often linked to fertility and the harvest. Their ability to see in the dark mirrored the Vanir's connection to unseen forces, their nocturnal prowess echoing Freya's mastery of seiðr, magic that revealed hidden threads of fate. Even the way cats move, fluid, deliberate, almost otherworldly, mirrored her own ability to navigate both battlefields and the realms of dreams. But let's not overlook the rebellion in her chariot's design. While Thor's goats or Odin's 8-legged steed embodied brute strength and divine grandeur, Freya's cats signaled something subtler: independence. Cats can't be ordered like dogs, they cooperate on their own terms. By choosing them, Freya subtly challenged the Aesir's obsession with control. Her power wasn't about domination, it was about alliance, about respecting the untamed spirit in all things. And then there's the darker edge to this bond. Norse myths hint that Freya's cats weren't just companions, but guardians of thresholds, their eyes reflecting the flickering lights of Fólkvangr as they escorted souls to her hall. In some traditions, cats were psychopomps, guiding spirits between life and death, a role that aligns eerily with Freya's duty as chooser of the slain. Their quiet purrs might soothe, but their presence also whispered of mysteries deeper than mortals could grasp. So the next time you picture Freya's chariot, remember, those cats aren't decorative. They're living symbols of everything she represents: wildness and warmth, autonomy and allure, the delicate balance between holding close and letting go. In a pantheon of gods who roared like thunder, Freya moved with the silent, sure-footed grace of a cat, leaving paw prints across the pages of myth. In the mist-shrouded verses of the poetic Edda, one poem stands out as a masterclass in Freya's cunning and compassion: Hyndla, the Song of Hyndla. Here, we see the goddess not on a battlefield or in her glittering hall, but on a midnight ride, her chariot cutting through the dark as she escorts the young hero Otter to meet his fate. Otter, a mortal devoted to Freya, has wagered his inheritance on proving his noble lineage, and Freya, ever the protector of those who worship her, won't let him face this trial alone. But her solution isn't to storm the halls of his rivals or smite them with divine fury. Instead, she employs something far more potent: her silver tongue and the reluctant wisdom of a giantess. Enter Hyndla, an ancient seeress who guards the genealogies of gods and mortals like a dragon hoarding gold. Freya doesn't request her help, she demands it, disguising Otter as her boar and confronting Hyndla with a mix of flattery and steel-edged authority. "Wake, maiden of giants," she calls, her voice honeyed yet unyielding. "We must speak beneath the stars tonight." What unfolds is a verbal duel, a clash of wits where Freya dances between manipulation and raw honesty. When Hyndla resists, Freya doesn't plead. She reminds the giantess of their shared past, of debts unpaid and alliances forgotten. She twists memories like threads of fate, until Hyndla, grumbling, spills the secrets of Otter's ancestry. But here's the twist: Freya's tactics aren't just about winning. They reveal her deep understanding of power's many faces. She could have forced Hyndla's compliance with magic or threats, yet she chooses persuasion, proof that even a goddess knows some battles are best fought with words, not weapons. And when Hyndla, bitter at being outmaneuvered, tries to curse Otter with a potion of forgetfulness, Freya's protective instincts flare. She intercepts the poison, ensuring her devotee's mind stays sharp and his lineage secure. This moment is quintessential Freya, fierce loyalty wrapped in ruthless pragmatism. The poem also offers a rare glimpse into her softer side. As they ride back at dawn, Freya doesn't just vanish into the ether. She stays with Otter, weaving his ancestry into a charm so he'll never forget not just his bloodline, but the goddess who fought for him. It's a tender act, one that contrasts starkly with her earlier cunning. But that's Freya in a nutshell, a deity who can outthink giants at midnight, then kneel in the grass at sunrise to ensure a mortal remembers his worth. Hyndla doesn't just showcase Freya's intelligence, it cements her role as a guardian of stories. In a world where lineage meant power, she ensured the voices of the overlooked like Otter weren't erased. And in doing so, she proved that her magic wasn't just in spells or necklaces. but in the way she shaped destinies, one whispered truth at a time. When Snorri Sturluson penned the prose Edda in the 13th century, he wasn't just recording Norse myths, he was filtering them through the lens of his own Christian worldview. And nowhere is this more apparent than in his portrayal of Freyja, the goddess who once stood at the heart of Viking Age spirituality is subtly diminished, her edges softened to fit a medieval moral framework. Take her domain over love and lust, Snorri emphasizes her beauty and desirability, framing her as a celestial object of admiration rather than a sovereign wielder of erotic power. Compare this to older skaldic poetry, where Freyja's sexuality isn't passive but potent, a force she harnesses to manipulate gods and mortals alike. In the prose Edda, her famed necklace Brísingamen becomes a trinket. In earlier lore, it's a talisman of divine authority, forged through her unapologetic negotiation with dwarves. Even Snorri's treatment of her role in war feels sanitized. He acknowledges her claim to half the slain, but the prose Edda sidelines Fólkvangr, focusing overwhelmingly on Odin's Valhalla. This isn't accidental. For a Christian audience, a female figure presiding over the afterlife would have been unsettling, especially one as unabashedly autonomous as Freyja. In contrast, the older poetic Edda paints her as a battle deity whose selections carry equal weight to Odin's, her hall a place of honor, not an afterthought. Then there's the curious case of Freyja's marriages. Snorri reduces Other to a footnote, a shadowy figure whose disappearance serves mainly to justify her tears. But older fragments suggest Other wasn't just a missing husband, he was a mirror of Odin himself, a wanderer whose name ties him to ecstatic states and poetic frenzy. Some scholars argue this was Snorri's way of splitting Freyja's power. By divorcing her from Other's mysticism, he subtly severed her connection to the divine frenzy that Odin monopolizes in the prose Edda. Perhaps the most glaring omission is Freyja's mastery of seiðr. Snorri mentions her magic but downplays its revolutionary impact, ignoring how even Odin relied on her teachings. In the Ynglinga saga, he goes further, labeling seiðr as unmanly and fraught with peril, a clear reflection of medieval biases against magic, especially when practiced by women. Yet earlier texts like Lokasennar revel in Freyja's magical prowess, showcasing spells so formidable they make Loki himself back down. But here's what Snorri couldn't erase: the echoes of Freyja's true stature that slip through his revisions. When he describes her as the most renowned of the goddesses, even he can't suppress her prominence, and in his account of Thor's cross-dressing farce to reclaim Mjolnir, Freyja's refusal to be traded like chattel speaks louder than any sanitized description. The prose Edda may have tried to tame her, but Freyja's essence, wild, sovereign, irreducible, still bleeds through the parchment. To find her in full, you must read between Snorri's lines, then turn back to the older verses where she strides, unapologetic, in all her tangled glory. The question lingers like mist over a Viking burial mound. Were Freya and Frigg once the same goddess? Scholars have wrestled with this puzzle for centuries, piecing together clues from fragmented myths, whispered place names, and the echoes of ancient rituals. On the surface, the two seem distinct. Frigg, Odin's wife, sits at the heart of Asgard as the All-Mother, a figure of marriage, prophecy, and domestic order. Freya, with her wild Vanir magic and dual command of love and war, blazes a more unpredictable path, but dig deeper, and the lines blur, suggesting a shared origin lost to time. Start with their names. Frigg stems from the Proto-Germanic Freyjo, meaning beloved, while Freya derives from Frajan, lady, Both titles echo each other like a chant across dialects, hinting at a common root. In southern Germanic traditions, Frigg dominates. In Scandinavia, Freyja rises. This regional split fuels the theory that they began as one deity, fracturing as cultures evolved, like a river branching into separate streams. Even their domains overlap. Frigg's weaving of fate mirrors Freya's seiðr, and both are tied to fertility, though Frigg's influence leans toward hearth and home, Freya's toward the untamed earth. Then there's the tangled web of their myths. In the poetic Edda, Frigg mourns her son Balder with a grief so vast it shakes the cosmos, yet Freya, too, weeps golden tears for her lost husband Other, whose name suspiciously resembles Odin's. Could Other and Odin have been conflated, their stories merging just as their wives might have? Even their symbols intertwine. Frigg's spindle and Freya's loom both speak to the threads of destiny, one measured and precise, the other vibrant and chaotic. Archaeology adds another layer. In Norway, place names honoring Freya cluster in coastal regions, while Frigg's legacy lingers inland, a divide that may reflect how migrating peoples adapted a single goddess to new landscapes. Artifacts from the Viking Age depict a goddess with both maternal and warrior traits, her iconography borrowing from each. A 9th-century pendant found in Sweden shows a woman clutching a spear, her necklace mirroring Brísingamen, yet her posture echoes Frigg's serene authority. Is this Freya, Frigg, or someone else entirely? But the most compelling argument lies in what's missing. Early continental sources mention only Frigg, while later Norse texts elevate Freya, suggesting a slow divergence. Tacitus, writing in the 1st century, describes a Germanic goddess resembling Frigg as the paramount deity, with no trace of Freya. By the Viking Age, Freya's cult burns bright, her worship entwined with seiðr and sovereignty. Did she split from Frigg as the Norse carved their own identity, embracing a goddess who embodied their fierce independence? Yet contradictions remain. Frigg is portrayed as steadfast, her loyalty to Odin unwavering. Freya defies expectation at every turn. Frigg's magic is subtle, woven into the quiet of the home. Freya's crackles with raw power. Perhaps they were never one, but sisters, two faces of the divine feminine, one the hearth's warmth, the other the wildfire. Or maybe the truth lies in the spaces between, where gods are never just one thing, but reflections of the people who revered them, shifting with the tides of time. What's certain is this: whether one goddess or two, their legacy endures, not in the rigidity of definitions, but in the stories that still stir the imagination. Freya's presence in the prophecies of Ragnarok is a haunting enigma, an absence that speaks louder than any battle cry. Unlike Odin, who falls to Fenrir, or Thor, who succumbs to the world serpent, Freya isn't explicitly named among the slain in the Völuspá's grim stanzas. But silence in myth is never empty. It's a canvas for interpretation, and here, it paints two stark possibilities. Either Freya survives the twilight of the gods, or her fate is woven into the very fabric of the cataclysm in ways the poets left unspoken. Consider the first thread: her survival. Freya's mastery of seiðr, the magic of foresight and fate weaving, suggests she might have seen Ragnarok coming long before the final battle. Would a goddess who commands the threads of destiny simply wait for doom? Unlikely. Her falcon cloak, a symbol of transformation and escape, hints at an ability to transcend even the end of worlds. And let's not forget her hall, Fólkvangr, a realm that exists outside the cyclic violence of Valhalla. While Odin's warriors march to their fated deaths, Freya's chosen rest under golden skies, their stories preserved. Could this sanctuary endure when Asgard falls? The myths don't say, but the implication lingers. Freya's power has always defied the expected. Then there's the darker interpretation, that Freya doesn't survive because, in a way, she is Ragnarok. Think about it. She's a fertility goddess tied to the earth's abundance, and the apocalypse isn't just about gods dying, but about winter swallowing the world. When the monstrous wolf-skirl devours the sun and the earth freezes, it's not just an attack on order but a death blow to growth, to fertility itself. Freya, as the embodiment of these forces, wouldn't need to fall by a sword. Her defeat would be written in the barren fields, the silent springs, the endless night. Her absence from the battle isn't an oversight, it's a poetic vanishing, her essence unraveling with the last harvest. Yet even this reading isn't the end. Norse mythology is relentless in its cycles after Ragnarok. The world is reborn. The earth rises green from the sea, and a new generation of gods inherits the cosmos. If Freya's magic is tied to renewal, could her death be less an ending and more a metamorphosis? The same goddess who wept gold for Other might leave her tears in the frozen soil, ensuring life stirs again when the frost retreats. After all, her brother Freyr, another Vanir god of fertility, is explicitly slain during Ragnarok, his sacrifice mirroring the seasonal decay that precedes regrowth. Freya's fate, then, might not be to fight or flee, but to become the silent promise beneath the snow. What is buried will rise. The beauty of Freya's role in Ragnarok lies in its ambiguity. She's neither champion nor casualty, but something far more profound, a force that transcends the binary of survival and destruction. Whether she walks away from the ashes or becomes the soil itself, her legacy endures, not in the thunder of the gods' last stand, but in the quiet certainty that after the longest winter, the flowers always return. The echoes of Freya's worship still ripple across Scandinavia, carved into the land itself. Take Uppsala, Sweden's ancient religious heart, where the air once hummed with chants to the gods. Adam of Bremen, an 11th century chronicler, described a grand temple there, its golden walls gleaming beside sacred groves. Though he doesn't name Freya directly, the threads are their fertility rites, prophetic seeresses, and a goddess figure entwined with love and war. Later scholars argue these practices align unmistakably with Freya's cult. Nearby, place names like Fröslanda, Freya's grove, whisper her presence, patches of earth where offerings might have been buried beneath the roots of oaks. Norway's landscape tells a similar story. From the fjords to the inland valleys, Freya's name lingers in villages like Freberg, Freya's hill, and Frøyhav, Freya's temple. These weren't just random labels, they were sacred coordinates, markers of where her followers gathered to invoke her blessings. Archaeologists have unearthed amulets, tiny silver figures of women wearing elaborate necklaces, their arms raised as if casting spells. One, found in Rallinge, clutches a staff like a cirrus mid-incantation. The necklace's loops mirror descriptions of Brísingamen, while the posture screams seiðr. Coins and brooches etched with cats, her sacred companions, further tether these artifacts to her worship, but the most tantalizing clues come from burial sites. In Oseberg, Norway, a lavish Viking ship grave held two women, one likely a high-ranking vulva, or seeress. Among their treasures, a cart adorned with cats and a tapestry depicting a procession of figures, some argue, led by a goddess resembling Freya. The grave's opulence, silks, spices, even a peacock feather from distant lands hints at a cult that spanned trade routes, carrying her influence far beyond Scandinavia's shores. What's striking isn't just the scale of her veneration, but its intimacy. Farmers buried amulets in their fields to summon her for fertility, warriors etched her name on spear shafts before battle. Women wove charms with cat fur, invoking her protection in childbirth. Freya wasn't a distant figure on a pedestal. She was woven into the daily rhythm of life, her power as close as the soil underfoot. Even after Christianity spread, her presence persisted hidden in folk tales of the Huldra, a seductive forest spirit with a cow's tail, or the mistress of the animals, a figure who commanded beasts much like Freya's chariot pulling cats. These fragments form a mosaic of devotion, one that challenges the simplistic view of Vikings as solely Odin's berserkers or Thor's thunder wielders. Freya's legacy was softer, subtler, yet no less enduring. She was the goddess who stayed not just in stone and silver, but in the stories muttered by firesides, in the names of valleys that still bear her touch, and in the quiet, stubborn magic of a land that never quite forgot her. In the smoky hearths of Viking farmsteads, Freya's name was whispered with the same reverence as the rustle of spring wheat. Farmers knew her as Jefn, the giver, and they called on her when the soil lay frozen and the stakes were highest. Before the first seeds touched the earth, offerings of bread, honey, and sometimes even prized amber echoes of her golden tears were buried at the field's edge. Women would braid stalks of grain into tiny likenesses of her famed necklace Brísingamen, hanging them in barns to invoke her blessing. And when the cows calved or the ewes lambed, it was Freya's sigils scratched into the troughs, a plea for life to flourish under her watch. These weren't just rituals, they were acts of survival, a partnership between mortal hands and divine grace. But Freya's influence reached far beyond the furrows. Lovers sought her with equal fervor, carving her name into birch bark talismans or stirring rose petals into mead. A maiden might tuck a sprig of flax, linked to Freya as Herne, the flaxen one beneath her pillow, dreaming of a face she'd yet to meet. Brides wore amulets shaped like cats, her sacred companions, to ensure passion didn't fade with the years, and when hearts broke, it was to Freya they wept, leaving tokens at lonely crossroads where the veil between worlds felt thin. Her magic wasn't just about desire, it was about authenticity, the courage to love fiercely and mourn openly as she had for other. Warriors, too, walked in her shadow. Before battle, some smeared their blades with paste made from crushed amber, Freya's hardened tears believing it would make their strikes unshakable. Others slept with cat-skin pouches holding runes inscribed with her name, trusting she'd guide their fate when steel met steel. The bravest even wore arm rings engraved with Fólkvangr's symbol, a silent vow that if they fell, her hall would welcome them. Unlike Odin's berserkers, who craved chaos, Freya's devotees fought with a different kind of ferocity, focused, precise, as if her falcon cloak let them see the battlefield from above. Then there were the Volvas, the seeresses who channeled Freya's most potent magic. Cloaked in feathered mantles like hers, they'd enter trances to read the threads of fate, chanting spells that blurred the line between prophecy and prayer. At seasonal festivals, they led rituals where women danced with distaffs, a nod to Freya's role as weaver of destinies, swaying to rhythms older than the gods themselves. Even children weren't exempt from her touch. Newborns were sprinkled with water steeped in Freya's sacred plants, while mothers hummed lullabies invoking her protection. This wasn't mere superstition. It was a tapestry of trust woven through every facet of Viking life, from the cradle to the battlefield, from the first kiss to the last harvest. Freya wasn't just worshipped, she was lived. Her presence curled like smoke through their homes, her stories etched into their bones, and though centuries have passed, the earth remembers. Plow a field in Denmark today, and you might still turn up a silver cat amulet, its surface worn smooth by fingers that once clung to it, whispering a name the wind hasn't forgotten. Freya stands apart from the classical love goddesses of Greece and Rome, not just in name, but in the very fabric of her mythology. While Aphrodite and Venus shimmer with the golden light of romance and beauty, Freya's allure is laced with something sharper, a blend of passion and steel that mirrors the Norse world's unforgiving landscape. Aphrodite, born from sea foam, embodies idealized love, her myths filled with dalliances and divine matches. Venus, her Roman counterpart, evolved into a symbol of imperial power and civic harmony, her temples centers of political reverence. But Freya, she doesn't just preside over love, she wields it like a weapon, her domain stretching from the bedroom to the battlefield, her heart as fierce as her sword arm. Consider the stakes. When Aphrodite sparks desire, it's often for pleasure or poetic drama. Paris and Helen's affair ignites a war, but the goddess herself remains above the fray, untouched by the bloodshed. Freya, meanwhile, doesn't watch from Olympus. She rides into the clash alongside her chosen warriors, her necklace Brísingamen gleaming like a battle standard. Love and death aren't separate realms to her, they're threads in the same tapestry. Where Aphrodite's priests offered roses and myrtle, Freya's followers buried amulets in the earth and stained their blades with amber, calling on her to bless both their harvests and their blows. This duality reflects something deeper about Norse cosmology. In the Mediterranean pantheons, love is often idealized, abstract, a force that inspires art and song. But to the Vikings, love was as visceral as a wound. It wasn't just about attraction. It was about loyalty, survival, the bonds that held families and warbands together in a world where winter could kill as surely as a rival's axe. Freya's grief for Other isn't a lament. It's a storm, her tears hardening into gold, as if to show that even sorrow could be forged into something enduring. Compare that to Venus mourning Adonis. Her tears birthed the anemone, a flower that withers in a day. Freya's love leaves marks on the world. Even in their symbols, the contrast is stark. Aphrodite's doves and Venus's swans speak of grace and tranquility. Freya's chariot is pulled by cat's creatures of quiet cunning and sudden violence, and her falcon cloak lets her soar not just above the clouds, but into the realms of the dead. She doesn't just inspire love, she follows it into the shadows, whether to reclaim a lost husband or to claim the fallen for her hall. While Venus's love promises empire and Aphrodite's inspires poets, Freya's love demands courage. To worship her wasn't just to seek affection, it was to embrace the full, messy spectrum of the heart, the tenderness that could mend a wound and the fury that could open one. Perhaps the most telling difference lies in their legacies. Aphrodite and Venus became muses, their myths softened by time into allegories. Freya's stories, though, never lost their edge. She remains unapologetically complex, a goddess who laughs in the face of easy categorization. Where other love deities were polished into symbols, Freya stayed human, flawed, fierce, and gloriously real. To the Norse, she wasn't just a goddess of love, she was love itself, wild, unpredictable, and worth fighting for. Freya's presence isn't confined to ancient parchment or weathered runestones, she strides boldly into the modern world, her influence pulsing through neopagan rituals, best-selling novels, and blockbuster games. Among contemporary spiritual movements, few honor her as fiercely as Vanatru, a branch of heathenry devoted to the Vanir gods. Here, Freya isn't just revered, she's a living force, invoked in ceremonies where practitioners don feathered cloaks and chant verses from the poetic Edda. Offerings of honey, barley, and handmade jewelry mirror those left 1,000 years ago, while rituals celebrate her dual roles as battlefield sovereign and hearth keeper. Modern vulvas, channeling her seiðr, trace spiral patterns in the earth, seeking visions as their ancestors once did, what draws thousands to revive her worship today. It's the raw authenticity of her myth, a goddess who refuses to be stripped down to simplistic archetypes, who embodies both the nurturing and the feral, the lover and the warrior. In an era hungry for spirituality that embraces complexity, Freya answers the call. Then there's literature, where she's been reimagined with fresh ferocity. Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology paints her with witty irreverence, yet underscores her pivotal role in the god's survival. Tessa Gratton's The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter repositions her as a symbol of resistance, her magic a metaphor for marginalized voices reclaiming power. Even in young adult fiction, like the Gospel of Loki, she's no passive prize but a strategist who outwits gods and giants alike. These portrayals tap into a cultural craving for female figures who defy tired tropes, characters who are neither flawless heroines nor one-dimensional villains, but fully realized forces of nature. Freya's modern literary renaissance isn't just about nostalgia, it's a correction, a reclaiming of her agency from centuries of patriarchal editing. But nothing has catapulted her back into pop culture quite like God of War, Ragnarok. The game's portrayal stunned players. This Freya isn't a sidelined love interest or a mystical guide, but a grieving mother turned vengeful wildfire. Her rage is palpable, her sorrow etched into every line of dialogue as she hunts Kratos with a blend of divine wrath and human vulnerability. Critics praised the depth of her character, how she mirrors the franchise's themes of parenthood and cyclical violence, while remaining unmistakably rooted in Norse myth. When she finally sheathes her sword, it's not because she's been tamed, but because she's chosen a path beyond revenge. This nuanced take resonated deeply, proving that ancient deities can still mirror modern struggles. Why does Freya's star burn brighter than ever? Because she embodies a paradox our era craves, unapologetic strength wrapped in tenderness. In a world where women are still pressured to fit into boxes, caregiver or CEO, gentle or fierce, Freya smashes the binary. She's a rallying cry for those who refuse to dilute their power, whether they're Wiccans casting circles under full moons, writers penning feminist retellings, or gamers clutching controllers as a digital goddess storms across their screens. Her revival isn't mere trendiness, it's a testament to myths that refuse to die, evolving to meet the hungers of each new age. And as long as people yearn for stories where femininity isn't a limit but a lightning strike, Freya's name will keep echoing, fierce and unstoppable, through the halls of our imagination. Modern portrayals of Freya often flatten her into a one-dimensional seductress, a reduction that would have baffled her Viking Age worshippers. This oversimplification stems from centuries of distortion, where medieval Christian scribes recast pagan deities as either saints or sinners, and Freya, with her unapologetic sexuality and magic, was too potent to fit neatly into either box. Take the infamous Malleus Maleficarum, the 15th century witch hunting manual that twisted Norse seiðr into witchcraft, linking Freya's rituals to devilish pacts. Suddenly, a goddess who once presided over life and death became a cautionary tale, her sacred practices demonized as heresy. Even today, pop culture can't resist framing her as a femme fatale, like in Robert Eggers' The Northman, where she's depicted as a shadowy figure whispering spells, more temptress than sovereign. But the distortions run deeper. Freya's association with Valkyries, while not entirely baseless, often gets mangled in modern retellings. Video games and movies frequently depict Valkyries as Odin's exclusive agents, erasing Freya's equal claim to them. In God of War, for instance, the Valkyries serve Odin unquestioningly, their ties to Freya severed. This ignores the poetic Edda, where she's called Valfreyja, mistress of the slain, and rides alongside them, her authority just as divine. The conflation stems from Snorri Sturluson's Prose Edda, where Christian biases blurred the lines between goddesses and Odin's maidens. By the time Romantic-era artists like Richard Wagner got hold of the myths, Freya's role had been carved up, her battle prowess gifted to Brunhilde, her allure isolated into something decorative. Then there's the persistent myth that Freya taught witchcraft to witches, a claim that misreads her seiðr as something sinister. Medieval texts like Örvar Odd's Saga recast her as a sorceress luring men to ruin, a trope that still lingers in fantasy novels where Vanir magic is code for dark arts. In reality, seiðr wasn't devilry but a respected craft. Freya's prophecies saved lives, her spells healed crops, and her rituals guided kings. The irony. Practitioners of modern Norse paganism now reclaim seiðr as sacred, hosting workshops to revive her techniques, while mainstream media still paints it as spooky hocus-pocus. Perhaps the most insidious misrepresentation is the insistence that Freya's power lies primarily in her beauty. Yes, the sagas call her the fairest, but they never divorce that beauty from her agency. When Loki sneers in Lokasana that she's bought by gold, a jab at Brísingamen, Freya fires back that he's a liar, and the gods take her side. Contrast this with Thor, Love and Thunder, where her cameo reduces her to a flirtatious hostess, her necklace treated as mere eye candy. The Norse never saw her allure as passive. It was a weapon, a shield, a language she wielded with precision. These distortions matter because they strip Freya of her complexity. She wasn't just a love goddess or a warrior queen, but a synthesis of both, a figure who defied binaries. When modern feminism embraces her as an icon, it's not just for her independence, but for her refusal to let others define her. To call her a witch ignores her divinity. To label her a Valkyrie erases her sovereignty, and to reduce her to a seductress that misses the point entirely. Freya wasn't powerful despite her femininity. She was powerful because of it, in all its tangled, uncontainable glory. The real myth isn't in her story, it's in our stubborn need to simplify her. Among Freya's most delightfully absurd yet revealing myths is the time she outmaneuvered Thor in a battle of wits without lifting a finger. The story begins with Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, stolen by the giant Thrym, who demands Freya's hand in marriage as ransom. The gods panic, but Freya's reaction is instantaneous. She refuses, her fury so palpable it shakes the halls of Asgard. "You think I'd let myself be traded like a trinket?" She roars, her eyes flashing with a fire that makes even Odin hesitate. But Thor, desperate to reclaim his weapon, devises a plan so ludicrous it borders on brilliance. He'll disguise himself as Freya, donning her bridal veil and Brísingamen to trick Thrym. The image is absurd, the burly thunder god squeezed into a gown, his beard tucked beneath a lace-covered face, but Freya's role here is subtle yet pivotal. By refusing to participate, she forces the gods to confront their own hypocrisy. They're willing to deceive a giant, but balk at the idea of actually sacrificing her autonomy. Even in absence, Freya exposes their double standards, proving her worth isn't just in her beauty, but in her unshakable will. Then there's the myth of the mead of poetry, a tale usually dominated by Odin's cunning, but Freya's fingerprints are all over it. When the dwarves Fjalar and Gjalar murder the wise cave Aesir, fermenting his blood into the legendary mead that grants poetic inspiration, the story typically credits Odin for stealing it back. But dig deeper. Freya's connection to the mead lies in its origins. Kvasir was born from the saliva of the Aesir and Vanir gods during their truce, a being of unparalleled wisdom, and who presided over that peace. Freya, the Vanir goddess who bridged the two pantheons. Without her, there'd be no Kvasir, and thus no mead. Even Odin's famed theft relies on Freya's legacy, as he seduces the giantess Gunnlöth to claim the mead, a tactic echoing Freya's own mastery of desire as a tool of persuasion. The mead's power to ignite creativity mirrors her seiðr, which wove fate itself into poetry. The skalds who drank it may have thanked Odin, but the mead's essence carried Freya's magic. One of her most haunting lesser-known tales involves the eternal battle of Hjathningavík, where Freya's grief fuels an unending cycle of violence. When her mortal lover, the king Hedin, is slain in battle, she doesn't just mourn. She ensures his death is never forgotten. Using her magic, she resurrects the fallen warriors each dawn, forcing them to fight anew every night. This isn't blind vengeance, it's a cosmic statement. Freya transforms the battlefield into a living memorial, a place where love and loss collide in an endless loop. Unlike Odin, who hoards warriors for Ragnarok, Freya's act freezes time itself, refusing to let devotion fade into oblivion. Some scholars interpret this as a metaphor for the seasons, where death and rebirth are inevitable. Others see it as Freya's rebellion against fate, a goddess so steadfast in love that she'll defy even the natural order to keep it alive. Then there's the curious case of Otter and Hyndla, a myth that showcases Freya's knack for bending truth to her will. When her devoted follower Otter needs to prove his noble lineage to claim his inheritance, Freya doesn't just assist him, she orchestrates an entire encounter with the giantess Hyndla, a walking archive of genealogies. Disguising Otter as her boar, Freya confronts Hyndla with equal parts charm and threat, weaving lies and flattery until the giantess spills the secrets of Otter's ancestry. The scene crackles with tension, Freya's diplomacy laced with menace. It's a masterclass in manipulation, revealing how she leverages both her divine status and her understanding of psychology to achieve her ends. These overlooked stories paint Freya not as a passive figure of beauty, but as a strategist, a rebel, and a guardian of memory. Whether she's exposing the gods' hypocrisy, fueling the mead of poetry, or freezing time for love, her lesser-known myths prove one thing: Freya's power wasn't just in what she did, but in what she made others do in her name. Every tale, no matter how obscure, adds another layer to her legend, one that's far richer and far more cunning than most people ever realize. Freya's image has danced through the centuries, transforming with each artist's chisel and brushstroke, yet her essence remains unmistakable. The oldest depictions of her emerge from Viking Age carvings, where she's often rendered with striking simplicity. Take the 8th century Gotland picture stones. Here, Freya appears as a faceless figure clutching a spear, her body a series of geometric lines that somehow convey both grace and power. What these carvings lack in detail, they make up for in symbolism. Her necklace, likely representing Brísingamen, is etched as a bold circle at her throat, a focal point that draws the eye, mirroring the necklace's legendary allure. Nearby, twin cats curl at her feet, their forms abstract yet instantly recognizable to worshippers who knew them as her sacred companions. These early artists didn't need realism to capture her divinity. A few deliberate strokes were enough to evoke the goddess who straddled war and fertility. Jump ahead to the 12th century Ernstave Church in Norway, and Freya's iconography takes a curious turn. Christian craftsmen, unable to erase her from cultural memory, sneaked her into their designs. Among the interlacing vines and dragons, A slender woman rides a cat-like creature, her long hair flowing like the surrounding tendrils. The church's builders likely passed her off as a biblical figure, but the nod to Freya is undeniable proof of her enduring hold even as pagan beliefs faded. The Romantic era of the 19th century unleashed a flood of Freya reinterpretations, each painting reflecting the era's obsessions. John Bauer's 1911 illustration for Nordic folktales shows her as an ethereal woodland spirit, draped in gauzy robes, her face soft and melancholic. It's a far cry from the spear-wielding Vanir goddess, but it captures the 19th century ideal of femininity, delicate, otherworldly, and just a touch tragic. Contrast this with Peter Nikolai Arbau's Asgardsreyin, where Freya gallops across the sky amid a wild hunt, her hair whipping like flame, her expression fierce enough to match Odin himself. Arbau, steeped in nationalist fervor, emphasized her Norse roots, portraying her not as a muse but as a force of nature. Modern artists continue to reinvent her, often with striking boldness. In contemporary fantasy art, Freya strides through digital canvases in armor that gleams like liquid gold, her Brísingamen reimagined as a high-tech torque pulsing with magic. LGBTQ+ reinterpretations celebrate her as a queer icon, highlighting her fluidity and defiance of norms. Even tattoo designs tell a story. Ask any incur, and they'll describe how clients request her image with cats coiled around runes, or her face half hidden by a falcon-winged hood, symbolizing transformation. What ties these disparate depictions together? The thread of autonomy. Whether carved into ancient stone or rendered in pixels, Freya is never merely decorative. She's a woman leaning into the wind, unafraid, her beauty present but never passive, her strength undeniable yet never crude. Every era molds her in its image, but the core remains, a goddess who refuses to be anything less than holy, unapologetically herself. Freya's legacy didn't vanish with the Viking Age, it seeped into the soil of Scandinavia, resurfacing in folklore as whispers of her power took new forms. One of the most striking echoes is the Huldra, a seductive forest spirit from Nordic tales. With her long, flowing hair and a cow's tail flicking beneath her dress, the Huldra lured hunters and wanderers into the woods, offering them blessings or ruin. Sound familiar? Like Freya, she's a figure of allure and danger, a bridge between the human world and the untamed wilds. But where Freya wielded seiðr and rode chariots, the Huldra's magic was subtler, a song on the wind, a fleeting touch that could heal or curse. Both are bound by the same duality, life-givers and tricksters, tender yet untamable. Then there's the Swedish Skogsra, a guardian of the forest who mirrors Freya's connection to nature. Described as breathtakingly beautiful, but with a back hollow as a rotting tree, she'd lead men astray unless they showed respect, offering gifts or kind words. This reverence for reciprocity echoes Freya's own demands. Farmers left offerings for her to ensure fertile fields, just as the Skogsra demanded tribute for safe passage. Even the way these spirits blur the line between benevolence and menace reflects Freya's complexity. She wasn't just worshipped, she was negotiated with, her favor earned through respect, not blind devotion. In Norway, tales of the Aesir, a spectral hunting party racing across the winter sky, bear her mark too. Some say Freya led this wild hunt, her chariot replaced by a ghostly steed, her cats transformed into shadowy beasts. The Aesir wasn't just a ghost story, it was a warning. Cross the wrong spirit, and you might be swept into their frenzy, just as Freya claimed the unwary for Fólkvangr. Even the timing aligns, these hunts often occurred during Yule, a season sacred to Freya, when the veil between worlds was thinnest. But perhaps the most poignant survival is in the Vulvas, the seerresses who lingered in rural Scandinavia long after Christianity's spread. These women, like Freya, practiced seiðr, chanting spells over staffs and brewing prophetic visions. Though branded as witches by the New Order, their rituals binding fate, healing with herbs, even wearing feathered cloaks, were straight from Freya's playbook. A 17th-century trial in Iceland accused a woman of riding the night with a spirit, her description eerily matching Freya's falcon cloak. The church called it heresy, the people knew it as memory. These aren't just scattered similarities, they're footprints. Freya's essence endured because she wasn't just a goddess, she was an answer to the land's oldest questions. How do you survive winter's hunger, bargain with the Huldra? How do you navigate love's risks, seek the Skogsra's wisdom? The Norse didn't stop believing in her when the temples fell. They simply folded her into the stories they told by firelight. And in those tales, she remained what she'd always been, a force too vital to vanish, a goddess who adapted but never bowed. Freya's story isn't one that fits neatly into a box. It's a tapestry woven with contradictions, each thread shimmering with its own fire. She's a goddess of love who rides into battle, a seer of fate who refuses to accept it, a Vanir outsider who became the Aesir's irreplaceable heart. Her myths defy the easy labels we so often slap onto ancient deities, revealing instead a figure as vast and untamed as the Nordic landscapes she hailed from. Whether she's claiming warriors for Fólkvangr, bargaining with dwarves for a golden necklace, or turning her grief into amber, Freya never does what you expect. That's the magic of her legacy. She's not just a symbol of love or war or magic, but of the messy, glorious complexity that comes when those forces collide. Her influence stretches far beyond the pages of the Eddas, from the farmers who whispered her name over their crops to the modern artists and writers who reimagine her as a feminist icon. Freya's resonance hasn't dimmed. She's a reminder that power isn't singular, it's layered, adaptable, and unapologetically multifaceted. And perhaps that's why her stories still captivate us today. In a world that often tries to pigeonhole women, mythical or mortal, into narrow roles, Freya smashes the mold with every step she takes. So, which Freya story resonated with you the most? Was it her fiery refusal to be traded for Thor's hammer, or the way she turned her tears into something golden and enduring? Maybe it's her role as the original Valkyrie, choosing warriors with a discerning eye, or her unshakable devotion to Other, even as he slipped through her fingers like mist. Drop your favorite moment in the comments below. We'd love to hear which part of her legend left its mark on you. And if you're hungry for more mythology deep dives like this, don't forget to subscribe. The Norse pantheon is vast, and Freya's just the beginning. Who should we explore next? The choice is yours.